So, Tanya, can you say a little bit about yourself and how you got into this area of work?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to. I've addiction treatment field for about 14 years. I started working in the field right out of college after getting my degree in psychology. And it's an interesting thing because I personally don't have the allergy to drugs and alcohol. I didn't know a lot about recovery. There was still a lot of the way that I perceived substance use disorder treatment was still very much stigmatized. And so when I actually went in for my job interview, on day one of my job interview, I was surprised to see a classmate of mine from my there with me, and we got to talking and she got to sharing about her experiences, and that was like an aha moment for me. So really, a little bit about my work, which is really thought leadership consulting, is I think thought leadership consulting is where we consistently tap into our passion, our stories, our lived experience, to consistently shape the future together for the better, right? It builds trust, it builds community. It's about getting visible in service of our mission. And so, yeah, I'm really passionate about this work, and I think our field needs it, right?
Great. Can you say a little bit more about that? Why does this field, the addiction recovery field, need DEI consulting and thought leadership?
Yeah, so the field has changed a lot in the 10 to 15 years that I've worked in it. I mean, so I used to primarily be a fundraiser, and I remember going to meetings of the Rotary Club or different spaces, right? I don't want to call them out, different spaces where I would speak to the work that we did as an addiction treatment center for primarily for women with children and pregnant women. And people would come back to me and say, in the meetings, why should we support your cause? Those women are making a choice, and that's not happening anymore, at least so verb. You would hear that in a room anymore, but I think people are still thinking it. Stigma is still very much alive, right? And so people have this incorrect, misinformed perception of what addiction really is. And, you speak to this so well. Part of that is because of the data gap, which is what you're working on. Another big part of that is really the stigma that still persists. And so I think the field needs thought leadership work, this personal change making capacity work, this strategic visibility work. There's a lot of ways to kind of describe it, but it's it because the world still does not fully understand that addiction is not a moral failing, but that it is a disease, right? That it is a diagnosable illness. And so I think thought leadership work is really important for this field because it helps us get in front of the people that can help us make shift happen, right? As fundraisers, as referral sources, as ambassadors, as, people who are going to maybe never publicly do anything, but support their family, tell their family where they should go to treatment because they've seen you get visible in support of your mission, right? So, yeah, I mean, long story short, it's because there's still so much stigma attached to addiction. And I think thought leadership can be an antidote for that.
Great. And so, what makes your approach unique? Maybe you could talk a little bit about who you work with and some of the work that you do. As
Yeah.
we talk about your approach.
Yeah. So I mostly work with people who have identities that have been historically overlooked and underestimated. So generally, I work with women. I work with a lot of women of color. And, what I will say is I also work with people who tend to have a lot of lived experience in the issue that they work on. In our case, that might be people who are in recovery. In other type, anyway, I won't get into other types of work because really this is about the addiction treatment field. But I think unfortunately, when we look at the working force of the addiction treatment field, it tends to be a lot. There are a lot of women in the field. There are a lot, but they tend to be in the roles that I say like are in the trenches, right? They're the counselors. They're the food staff. They're the nurses. They're the ones delivering and when you look at the executive levels of those places, the boardroom table, right? It tends to be men, to be white men, for the most part. I see that changing a little bit more recently, but the percentages are still very, very much off. And it'll take time to get to more balanced percentages, right? It'll take generations, unfortunately, I think. I don't know that it'll even happen in my lifetime. But, that doesn't mean that we don't need to be doing this work, right? Because, I think another piece of the pie too is as we see more women of color being influential folks who have leadership persona, who have CEO persona, who are, on the stages of NAATP, right? Speaking, which is, I think, something my hat is off to you, to NAATP for, making sure your conferences are more inclusive. I think that's a magic ingredient too, right? Because I think we can get to diversity and inclusion, but I think we have to see more women and leaders of color in those influential roles for us to achieve more, equity and justice, because we can't be what we can't see, right? So I think that's what makes my approach unique, is I really want to work with folks who have a lot of wisdom and who historically just haven't been at the table.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Tanya.
You're so welcome. Thanks for this opportunity.